I'm Brian Noble, CEO of Family Policy Institute of Washington.
And I'm Brad Payne, President of FPIW Action.
Couple disclaimers before we start this video. Nothing in this video should be taken as an endorsement of the candidate, nor the candidate's endorsement of FPIW or FPIW Action. It's simply a public service to meet and greet the candidate. Also, this is pre-recorded and placed on several platforms of FPIW and FPIW Action. Brad?
All right, I get the first question. If you would state your name and the position you're running for, and then if you give us a little background about yourself, a little introduction, and then if you're willing, share just a little bit about your family.
That sounds great. And thank you both, Brad and Brian, for having me on. Terry Roberts, I'm running for the state legislature, House seat position 2 in the 24th Legislative District, which is virtually all of the Olympic Peninsula. A little bit about my background. I've got a very interesting professional career. The first half of that career, 20 plus years, was in social services, working for a private entity, Service Alternatives for Washington at the time, and Catholic Community Services, which is a nonprofit. Both agencies worked with DSHS, and I had the pleasure of co-authoring some material that is being taught and trained in the public school system, even to this day, even though I've long left that profession. And that curriculum was used predominantly to train teachers and teachers' aides working with special needs students. So it was a very interesting part of my career. 180-degree turn, the second half of my career has basically been in finance and payments and information technology. I'm a project manager for Discover Financial Services. We work on a lot of large-scale projects with Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies, both nationally and internationally. And I, like a lot of project managers, am responsible to make sure these projects get completed. And I have basically no authority over the people I'm working with or the teams I'm working with. But ultimately, it's my head that's on the chopping block if the project doesn't get finished. But I have spent that last 20 plus years in this part of the business, and it's been a heck of a ride. It's been really enjoyable. And like I said, working on a lot of large scale projects that include information technology, banking, finance, and payments. So that's a little bit about my professional career. My wife and I both grew up in Seattle, her on Capitol Hill and me on Queen Anne Hill. And we've spent most of our lives moving further and further out of the city and looking for a little bit of solace and relaxation in the great outdoors. And we were living in Maple Valley, Issaquah. And about 20 plus years ago, we decided to buy some property on the Olympic Peninsula. And we really just bought it for investment purposes. But one day we were riding our horses up here on the property, and we came into a little opening, and we turned around and looked, and there was Mount Rainier. We could see Mount Rainier clearly from this spot on our property. And we thought, if we were ever going to build a house and live out the rest of our lives, this would be the place to do it. And it was probably not more than 2 or 3 months after that we made a decision to build on the Olympic Peninsula. So we've been here ever since. We love the peninsula. And as Washingtonians, of course, we'd visited the peninsula many, many times in the past and enjoyed all the natural beauty here. And we just decided that this is where we wanted to live out the rest of our lives. Another little interesting snippet about my family. My mother is a survivor of both Japanese occupation and the Korean War on the Korean Peninsula. She's passed away now, but the stories and what she endured were truly, truly amazing. My dad was with the 204th Artillery Battalion in Korea, where he met my mom, and they married. And literally the things that my dad had gone through, and especially the things my mother had gone through, really imbued a sense of patriotism, I think, in all of her children, grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren, and a responsibility that we need to step up and serve in some capacity. A lot of family members that are active duty military and a lot of others that are very active in their local churches. and some like myself who's decided to run for office to try and help out. So there's a little background on our family and how we got to the Olympic Peninsula in my career.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. What would you say is motivating you to run for this particular office?
Well, I think to build on Brian, what I had just said, when we moved here, we were just thinking about our retirement. My wife is retired. I'm about to retire. And so we were just looking forward to living in our local community. We're north of Quilcene and just enjoying the remainder of our lives. But as we started to look around us and look at some that aren't as fortunate as we are, and look at really the devastating effects of a lot of the policies that have been engaged in over the past 20 or 30 years in the state of Washington and here in the 24th Legislative District, I couldn't sit by and do nothing. There are policies that have been enacted that have a direct correlation to the way people live today, whether it's the high inflation, gas prices, food prices, prices of childcare. When it comes to education, we've seen a lot of our public schools go in a direction that most people are not in favor of. We see a lot of monopoly in state government and favoritism in state government. And to tell you the truth, I've just had enough. And I thought, look, I'm not going to sit back in my retirement and just enjoy life while others have a difficult struggle. And I thought I have to step up and do something.
Excellent.
Very good. All right. My question, kind of two-part again. One, if you could pick, say, your top two concerns or issues that you'd like to talk about, and then what would you hope to accomplish in office if you're elected?
Wow, Brad, that's a tough one because there's so many issues that we need to engage on. If I'm forced to take a couple of those, I would say it is the lack of affordable housing as probably either one or two, and the other is the cost of living. There are lots of other issues that are critical and important, particularly to the people here in our district. On the peninsula, logging is a big issue. Water conservation is a big issue. We have multiple tribes that are here in the district. There are lots of things we need to talk about and address, but those two that I named, I think are paramount on my list. So with regard to housing, we have very, very clearly underestimated demand. We knew it was going to happen, but we underestimated its impact. And then we have artificially suppressed supply when it comes to housing through a whole variety of mechanisms, elements of the Growth Management Act, which was written years ago. And I think some of that was viable at that time, but it needs to be revisited. Regulations that are unrealistic on builders. And because of us artificially suppressing supply, we cause prices to go up. Demand increases, supply goes down, and what happens to prices? It's basic economics. So there are things I'd like to do to increase supply and drive prices down. And this is both for home ownership and for rental. We see big needs on the district for inexpensive rental, or I should say reasonable rental costs for people. Lots of workers here on the peninsula, in middle income brackets, and they just can't find good rentals. So I think if we make some changes in the GMA, we help local counties in minimizing some of these very restrictive and unrealistic regulations, we can help to build new housing, lower rental costs, and lower the cost of home ownership. And I'd like to see us do that statewide. The other issue I mentioned, and that's overall cost of goods and services, inflation. Can we have a dramatic impact on it as state legislators? I don't think so. Can we have some impact? Absolutely. Much of the problem we face today is driven by the Fed. The Fed has raised interest rates. The current administration in Washington has pumped stimulus into the economy, and that has caused inflation. My opponent at a debate the other day said inflation was caused by COVID. I called him on it. Absolutely wrong. Has nothing to do with it. It is the quantitative easing policies of the Federal Reserve and it is the massive pouring of stimulus into the economy that has caused inflation. That's going to have to be dealt with on the federal level. And I hope people make wise choices when it comes to that. What can we do on the local level? We can eliminate taxes that will have a real impact on consumers. Lower tax rates on gasoline, lower tax rates for businesses, and do things in that vein to help lower overall prices across the board for consumers and give them some breathing room until we can address some of the larger federal problems. One other thing I'd mention about the economy too, I think we need to invest in small industrial kinds of businesses. And when I say invest, I'm not talking about government handouts. I'm saying about create an environment where those small industries can pop up in different communities because they bring revenue into that community and they bring jobs and good jobs that pay a decent wage. So that combined with our changes in housing are going to help people to earn a good living, have housing they can afford, and lower their overall consumer prices.
Excellent. Our fourth and final question is FPIW Action and FPIW provided for you 18 issues or policies that we are continually working on. And for our listeners, that's anything from public safety to legal immigration, environmental stewardship, property rights, etc. Any of those that you'd like to comment on? These are maybe like your secondary things or that kind of thing that you would like to talk about.
Sure. Good question, Brian. Yeah, the short answer is yes. I want to talk about all of them, but I'll try to limit it.
Okay.
When it comes to public safety, this is an enormous concern of mine, particularly when we talk about opioids and the fentanyl epidemic, et cetera. Quick story. A friend of mine who's a retired deputy sheriff was telling me about they busted a drug ring over in the Port Angeles area, and it was a local biker gang. I shouldn't say local, a biker gang that's up and down the West Coast, actually working with elements of illegal aliens from south of the border. They busted these folks. They threw them into jail. The alien that was here illegally, that was their primary contact, was released, and in about a 2-week period was deported. Another police action took place a month or two later. They busted the same guy. So he was back already from Guatemala, I think. I can't remember what country he was from. But public safety for me is a very, very important thing. And I think this is where the state can help out in terms of providing resources to local jurisdictions to help them out. But I think the other thing we can do is, rather than take our money and ship it down to Olympia and then get some of it back to do this, why not keep that money in-house in the district so that we can meet our basic needs, which are police, fire, roads, et cetera. When it comes to the family, real briefly, it's a building block of our society. And it ties into that drug epidemic that we have. If there is no demand, there will be no supply. Why are our young people in such huge numbers seeking to escape reality? That's the question we should be asking ourselves. And what can we do as parents, grandparents, as a community to reestablish the family as a solid building block with no divorce, love and care for their children, focus on their children's education? These are elements that we have to look at. We keep nipping away at the edges of this problem, but we never seem to get to the root of it. And so that, for me, is where the root of the problem exists.
Very good. Well, Terry, I'm almost sad. Do we have to come to an end?
Yeah.
Good, thoughtful responses. We appreciate that. We thank you for taking the time to visit with us, and we wish you much luck and sustained strength for one more week during this primary period. So
thank you so much
for joining us.
Appreciate it, Brad, Brian. Love what you folks do. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm Brad Payne from FPIW Action.
And I'm Brian Noble from FPIW. A friendly reminder that nothing in this video is considered an endorsement of the candidate, nor the candidate's endorsement of FPIW or FPIW Action. Like we like to say around here, go out there and love your neighbor by faithfully stewarding the public square. God bless.